Hey everyone, it's so ironic. I know some of you guys were asking us, is this really a live show? It seems to be so well produced. Well, you shouldn't have asked that question because now we're proving to you this is definitely live. Now, I wish you would have been staying with us while we dropped off the virus because we are talking about psychopaths, serial killers, and black cats. That was literally the conversation we had off the record. Now, as we move on, I am so pleased to tell you a little bit more about humor and laughter because our next guest is Sophie Scott, a professor in neuroscience. She's also researching the voice, speech, and laughter. She's published more than 200 papers on the behavioral psychology. And she's also, guess what, a stand-up comedian. I don't know how that works out, but we're going to find out. Welcome, Sophie.
Hi. Hello.
So listen, so good to have you here. I mean, you studied laughter. Tell me a bit about the psychology of laughter and why it is so powerful in a corporate context.
The psychology of laughter it's very interesting because it's all very counterintuitive. So we tend to think that laughter is about jokes and comedy and humor, and that's what makes us laugh. But actually, I mean, we do laugh at those things, but most of the laughter you produce is happening just because you're with other people. You're 30 times more likely to laugh if there's someone else with you than if you're on your own. And you'll laugh more if you know those people, and you'll laugh more if you like those people. So we think it's something to do with humor, and it is associated with humor, but it has this much bigger life, which is a social behavior. It's a social emotion. It's an emotion that lives in interactions with other people.
I'm not sure I understand. Sophie, when we talked last, you said something I thought was very profound. You talked about groups using dark humor as a way to help them cope. For example, hospitals or police people. I mean, I've never heard that concept before, but I thought it was fascinating. Can you, if you don't mind, can share that with a group?
Absolutely. So a very common use of laughter is to sort of show that things are okay. I'm fine. This is a sort of be more playful in your intention. And you see that absolutely everywhere, but it's incredibly important in stressful situations, particularly when people have to work with very difficult topics or difficult things to deal with, and they have to work in a team. Particular kind of forms of dark humor start to come about that are very specific to that job. And those seem to be both very efficient ways of dealing with the stress, because you get to acknowledge and laugh at the thing that's stressing you. You get to feel better because you've been laughing. You get to improve your connections with the people that you're working with. You work better as a team because you've been laughing together. And actually, it also excludes everybody who's not in on the joke. So actually, on many different levels, you can think of laughter as being something that is providing lots of different kinds of benefits to people in working interactions as well as in the rest of their lives.
So it's a fine balance, isn't it? I'm thinking about we are in this political correctness age now where you hardly dare to say anything right now. How do you navigate it? In fact, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take you by surprise here and play a video clip from your Prime Minister in the UK and just have your reflections on this particular piece of humor, right?
Kermit the Frog sang, "It's not easy being green." You remember that one? I want you to know that he was wrong.
Why? Why would you do that to me? It's very interesting as a piece of comedy because it doesn't work. People aren't laughing. And one of the extraordinary things about live comedy is it's an art form where you know in the moment if it's working or not, because if there's no laughter, it's not working. And he says, "Oh, it's not easy. But Kermit the Frog, do you remember him? Because I didn't get the laugh I thought I'd get when I mentioned Kermit the Frog." And it's just dreadful to watch because he starts to get a little bit of like a sounds from the audience. You clearly are sort of, well, if we don't give him something, he's going to keep asking us. But it's painful. It's painful to watch. I think it's got less to do with political correctness and more to do with a somewhat too great a sense of confidence that anything I do is hilarious. People will love this. I'm going to talk about Kermit the Frog. He was green.
That's funny.
I just want to.
I got one question for Sophie. So yeah, I've got the ultimate respect for anybody as a stand-up comedian. That takes guts because you got to die up there sometime. And how do you do it? How do you stand up there when you're just dying? Because I'm sure if you've done enough comedy, you have to have died sometime up there on the stage.
You do, and one of the first things that you have to learn when you do stand-up comedy, and you can actually only learn it when there's an audience there, is that when you get to a point when you're expecting the audience to laugh, you have to stop. You have to stop talking. You may even take a drink or do something, just kind of cues, this is the punchline. And also, if they don't laugh at that point, to then carry on without looking like you're mortified. And you can only learn to do that with an audience. And if you want a really classic mistake that new comedians make, or people are doing it for the first time or first few times, is they keep talking through their punchline. They get to a funny bit and then they don't leave that gap. And the audience will start laughing and then they'll stop because they want to hear what you're saying. So it's more like a weird conversation, stand-up comedy, than it is a sort of a comedic monologue. But that means that, of course, there is the tremendous possibility that they won't laugh. If they don't laugh when you're expecting them to, you have to get through that. And then, of course, that builds up. They are not laughing. You realize that you are dying. And it's awful. It's absolutely awful. So I find that it's good in two ways. First of all, you learn from this, like, what did you do wrong? Because it will be something about people blame the room or they'll blame people who are ordering drinks, but it's also stuff that you've done. You put something. One of the worst times I've died is when I did a whole routine about the science of disgust, and it turns out I was just much too disgusting. I think I just upset people. But see, you can kind of deal with it in the moment, and there's almost a kind of almost bizarre kind of triumph in not letting it show that it's got to you. Like, I will get to the end of this and I will, as if you were laughing, I will give you the same thing. And then, of course, you go home and you feel horrible. And the comedian Sarah Millican in the UK has this rule called the 11 o'clock rule, which is you can feel sorry about yourself until 11 o'clock the next day and then forget about it. Because if you go into your next gig thinking about how you just died, you'll do it again. And so it is actually quite useful as a sort of discipline to make yourself get rid of the stuff that was an unpleasant memory, learn from it what you can, and then stop complaining about it, move on from it. There's always bad audiences. It was them, not you.
Margaret, I want to bring you into the picture here because you talk a lot about tribes. You talk about creating the right constellation of people. You also say that we lost the human side, or we increasingly, because of technology, losing this human side. When you listen to what Sophie's talking about with laughter, what do you take with you home here? What ingredients would you use in your leadership style if you were a leader watching this right now?
Well, I really love Sophie's work, partly because she really puts her finger on something, which is that when things are intrinsically very funny, people tend to get quite serious. And when they're really catastrophic, they tend to laugh. And the laughter is a fantastic release of tension. And it does build quite a lot of sense of solidarity if it's, the right joke in the right moment. And certainly when I was, directing drama for the BBC, if I was directing a really deeply depressing play, we'd laugh all day. And if I was directing a comedy, nobody'd laugh at all, not at all. So it's, it's very counterintuitive. I think it's super hard as a leader to know how to use comedy well. I mean, clearly Boris Johnson doesn't, as we saw from that clip. And it's risky because you do risk alienating people who don't get it or might not know the reference or whatever. So, one of the funny things doing this for me about doing the Super Chicken talk was, when the first time I ever gave it, I was kind of amazed that people laughed because, when I was rehearsing it on my own, nobody laughed, And so it's quite a tricky thing tricky thing to use. But in really great teams, what you'll see is that they develop a kind of comedy language, which is a sort of gentle teasing or reference to things in the past. And I even know companies I've worked with now, if they discover they have super chickens, so hyper competitive people who want to dominate, instead of trying to pull them down or shut them up, they just quietly start clucking in the background, and it does the trick. Everybody knows what the statement is, right? It's not too mean, but the temperature goes down a bit and people get back to doing kind of listening to each other.
Absolutely love it. Listen, we have a viewer out here which is asking a hilarious question. I'm going to just read it aloud. My question is, behind every successful man, there is always a woman. My question is, who is behind an unsuccessful man? This is Sabas from Tamil Nadu in India.
I would say that behind an unsuccessful man is usually a really brutal, competitive father who's saying you're not good enough. You're not good enough. Try harder. You're useless. That would be my guess. I mean, when I think of the less effective leaders I've known in my career, that's usually what they've grown up with.
Margaret, that is a killer answer, I have to say. But it also leads me into the next part I want to cover here. We have a question from, we call it the BCG Minute. In fact, a recent study, how to future-proof your workforce based on 366,000 respondents across 197 countries, which basically is the whole world. Now, in this BCG study, they revealed that, among others, fear plays a major role in corporations. In fact, fear alone reduces the productivity with some 30%. Now, I want to play this video for you guys, and I think I'll start with you, Margaret, just to hear your reflections. Let's roll the tape.
Hi, my name is Rich Sheridan. I'm the co-founder, CEO, and chief storyteller here at Menlo Innovations in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I have a question for the M&M panel. When did fear become the big thing in management thinking? When did we ever begin to believe that leading people with fear was the right way to manage human beings? I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have in workplaces today. We've got to root it out. We've got to teach our leaders how to get this fear out of the room, to pump fear out of the room. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you.
So, some of this starts in the 1960s with a social psychologist named Doug McGregor, who had this, what he called theory X and theory Y. They weren't very scientific theories, and one said people come into work in order to not work and to undermine and to be lazy and to skive off. And they've got to be managed and pushed and beaten into submission, basically. And so you have to manage them with sticks. Right. And then the other theory is, the carrot theory, essentially. No. Give them things to look forward to and rewards and all this sort of thing. So it's a very kind of vicious, simplistic way of conditioning people. Fast forward, a couple of decades, and you get GE proselytizing this notion of forced ranking, right? Measure everybody once or twice a year, really reward the top 10% and give them all sorts of cool titles and projects and send them on swanky executive training programs. And then the bottom 5 or 10% just throw them out because they're obviously rubbish. Now, what's so fascinating to me about forced ranking is, A, you don't have to be a mathematical whiz kid to see the safest place to be is in the big fat middle of the bell curve. Just be average, not too good, because then you'll have lots of super chickens that you have to fight with. And not so bad, you get thrown out. So actually, it's the recipe for mediocrity. And when I asked people in GE a couple of years ago why they'd thrown out their forced ranking system, they said, well, its real utility is it made it really easy legally to fire people. But when we crunched the data, we saw that nobody ever moved in their ranking, really. You know, if they found a safe spot, they just hung on to it. And you saw something similar at Microsoft, which for years, you know, missed databases, mobile games, all sorts of major technologies. And it was, you know, and when they finally gave up their forced ranking, you know, the creativity of the company just absolutely exploded. It was tremendous. But so these managerial systems create a sense of fear, which either means people give up, learned helplessness, or they start, you know, trying to make other people fail so that they look good. So it's a kind of terrible mindset with which to try to inspire people and give them the sense of freedom and autonomy they need to come up with their very best thinking. One other point, you know, I've written in Will for Blindness a lot about organizational silence. This is research done by two academics, Morrison and Millikan, at New York University Stern School of Business, where they asked a whole cross section of executives, do you have issues or concerns at work that you don't voice? 85% of them said yes. The reason? Fear of retribution from my colleagues or my supervisor. That's a lot of silence. That's a lot of ideas, creativity, concern that's not being articulated because people are still afraid at work.
Marcel, you as a coach, you would have seen this. Why is it that these leaders are doing that?
Well, I mean, to me, this idea of, you know, when did fear start? Let's try the cave. I mean, just try the cave. That's where it started. I mean, humans have been managing by fear for centuries. So I think what's healthy in the future is trying not to have fear be the major motivator and do something different for a change. I mean, let's face reality. All these people talking about the new world and how bad it is. Hello, did you ever read a history book? What do you think that was like? It was worse. It was worse. I mean, so I think fear has been with us for a long time. I think that, you know, what Margaret is saying is fantastic, because Peter Drucker said, look, the leader of the past knows how to tell, the leader of the future knows how to ask. All that crap that may or may not have worked in the past is not going to work in the future.
So and I mean, you studied neuroscience, and I assume that the fear spot must be the amygdala or something like that. Tell me a little bit more about the neuroscience aspect of this and how you navigate this transition we have from a fear-based leadership culture to a very collaborative culture.
I was just thinking when you were talking about this, how similar it is in science in terms of our understanding of human behavior. There's a tremendous amount of research into fear. If I go onto the main database for scientific papers and put in the term emotion, expression, fear, I'll get back thousands of papers, well over 4,000 papers. If I switch out fear for laughter, I'll get back about 150 papers. And it really is the case that we have constructed generally, when we talk about emotions in the sciences, what we mean are negative emotions. Only relatively recently, people like Barbara Friedrichsen have been arguing we should study the positive stuff as well, because that matters. But it seems less scientific. So you can take, you know, one of the reasons why fear is so big in neurosciences is you can study it in mice. We can operationalize what fear means in mice, and then we can apply that to humans and to our understanding of the brain in what looks like a seamless way. And that's great. But mice also play. They do happy things. We just choose to ignore that in terms of building our models of emotion. So I think there is a change coming, and it's happening. There is more work now when people have sort of taken a step back and said, important as negative emotions are, positive emotions are, if anything, more important. For example, they tend to be social emotions. They're the ones that govern or are managing your interactions with other people. And just like Margaret was saying, we know that if you want people to do things, you will always be more successful if you're the way that you're rewarding this is a positive way. That there is, you know, one of the best ways of improving mood is to have something to look forward to. So it's actually just a better, in terms of psychology, way of both motivating people and understanding humans is to think about positive emotions. And I'm hoping that is starting to translate into the science of how we approach management.
So the conclusion is the glass has to be half full and not half empty. What an amazing note to wrap up on. Listen, I want to say on behalf of Marshall and I, thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely amazing. I could continue on forever. I know, Marshall, you could do the same. And we can see that on the number of questions out there, which is in the hundreds at the moment. So we will continue the dialogue online. But Marshall, before we wrap up, what are some of your reflections so far?
Yeah, my reflection is I wish we could talk to these two forever, because it's so nice. Speaking of fear, I think we're talking about two people that aren't afraid. And I think that was just a wonderful reflection of people who are able to actually be refreshing and say something that isn't canned and doesn't look like it's, management 101.
Amazing. Well, I assume this is somehow leading us towards the direction of a mule summary. So let's just run the mule summary. Now, one of the things I picked up here was definitely the whole idea about the super chickens, and the whole idea about that diversity for sure is giving multiple angles to the same topic, which again is creating somewhat of a challenge. So that diversity is really good. I would also say that conflicts is one of the things Margaret talks a lot about. You need to have conflicts in order to ensure that there is this kind of disruption happening here. Super important. Now, conflicts, if you have that diversity, it actually has a sense of trust. Now, it's not coming by itself, but if you have diversity, there's so many angles being listened to that trust is starting to be established, hopefully. Now, that leads to some sort of debate, and the debate is leading to innovation. That's one of the things Margaret talks a lot about, that the debate, the conflicts, and the diversity is generating the innovation point. But if I should now swap the angle to Sophie, and this is starting to be tricky with my summary here, well, then I would claim that laughter, on the other hand, probably could be the glue to create that sense of trust and confidence in each other, so you feel comfortable about going out on the limb and actually say things which is not necessarily safe, but it's a damn good idea. That is because we are creating a sense of belonging. Laughter belongs to a tribe. We laugh about it and the other people don't understand it. That's really the base. When I spoke to Sophie, she said to me the other day, no one will find the same joke fun. There will always be people who are not finding it fun. And that sense of belonging, again, is generating trust. And trust is then leading to courage. And courage is then, in the end of the day, leading to an alignment, because we then align ourselves based on the trust. And that, again, is flipping together with Margaret's idea about that is creating a sense of ideation, creativity, and, of course, courage. So it all comes together in a beautiful mural summary. Marshall, did I pass this exam?
Jesus Christ, that was impressive. That was the best summary I've ever seen. I don't know how the hell you did that. So
neither do I. Don't tell anyone.
You didn't have little designs. I mean, good Lord, you're over the top on that one.
Thank you. I'm curious to see what Margaret says, because Margaret, she's told me I don't like models, so she's going to kill me when we go into the green room now. But don't. Anyway, listen, everyone. What's happening next? Well, the 5th of October, we'll be joined by Nicholas Merchant and Cody Cannon, two extraordinary people who will be discussing the topic of personal branding. And oh my, these people, they know their home turf. Cody served as the director of speech writing for President Obama through his whole period, and he helped build the Obama brand. And Nicholas, selected by the Thinkers 50 as the #1 person most likely to influence the future of management in both theory and practice, and actually by Twitter was voted among the 25 smartest women in the world. I mean, those two individuals certainly have a very strong say on how do we build a personal brand. Marshall, I can't wait to see what they're going to say.
Very fun.
So that's it. Thanks, Marshall. Thanks to Margaret, Sophie. I can only say see you next Tuesday, same time, same place. Bye for now.
We've boiled it down to two things that we think are universal: humble people and hungry people. How do we find people that will hold each other accountable, as uncomfortable as that might be? Teamwork is not a virtue, it's a choice.